The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right, so we are online. We want to make sure that the people on the webinar can hear us okay. So if you can raise your hand, that lets us know that you can hear us. Awesome. Thank you. So welcome, and thank you for attending today. It is March 27th, and the time is 1 p.m. Before we get started, we want to introduce ourselves to you and the staff members who are present on the webinar. My name is Darcy Magnuson. I'm a regulatory analyst with the Division of Professions and Occupations. Also attending is Karen Phelan, who is the program director for the State Board of Optometry. Christina Jones is the program specialist, and Elena Kemp is a regulatory coordinator. We'll be facilitating the stakeholder meeting today. As some of you have probably been to DORA stakeholder meetings before, the division has transitioned to a platform that is 100% virtual amidst the concerns with the spread of COVID-19, and we'd like to reiterate the importance of your comments today. As you are aware, DORA makes decisions every day that may affect your life and your business. Your input is vital in the rulemaking process. Throughout this process, our goal is to create regulations that clarify and explain legislation, ensure minimum competency to enter and continue to practice, and provide only what is absolutely necessary for consumer protection without creating unnecessary barriers to the marketplace. Your input will be part of the information that goes to the board as it considers adopting or amending the rules we will be discussing today. More specifically, we'll be discussing the proposed new Rule 1.26 that was created to implement Senate Bill 19079. This legislation requires optometrists to prescribe controlled substances electronically on or after July 1st, 2021, unless a statutory exception applies. Additionally, we will be discussing changes to all of the State Board Optometry's rules in compliance with Section 24.4.103.3 of the Colorado Revised Statutes, which mandates a regularly scheduled review of the rules to assess the continuing need, appropriateness, and cost effectiveness of its rules to determine if they should be continued in their current form, modified, or repealed. The statutorily guided principles for review are to ensure the rules are necessary, the rules do not overlap or duplicate other rules of the agency, federal, state, or local government rules, are written in plain language and are easy to understand, achieve the desired intent, and determine if more or less regulation is necessary, are amended to provide more flexibility, reduce regulatory burdens, and reduce unnecessary paperwork or steps, if at all possible, while maintaining their benefits, are implemented in an efficient and effective manner, including the requirements for the issuance of permits and licenses, have a timely cost-benefit analysis produced, if requested, pursuant to Section 24.4.103, subsection 2.5, and are adequate for the protection of the safety, health, and welfare of the state or its residents. The meeting is being recorded today, and will be posted on the website at a later date. It will also be provided to the board for review as the board moves through this potential rulemaking process. As this stakeholder meeting is being held solely by webinar, we ask that you raise your hand if you want to provide any input regarding the proposed red line changes, and we can unmute your line so you can be heard by everyone and we can capture it for the recording, or you can type in a comment into the question section and we can read it out loud. Before we start taking comments, we want to ask that anyone who is providing comments, please state your name and who you represent. You can provide general comments on the rule changes or specific comments on the proposed language. Keep your comments limited to 3 to 5 minutes or less, and try not to repeat something that was already said, but we do appreciate if you state whether you're in agreement with someone else so we can note that. If you are using the audio through your computer, please remember to put any phones on vibrate or turn them off. And whether you are using computer or phone audio, try to keep background noise to a minimum when speaking. So we do have the red line rules up on the screen in front of you. And now we will go ahead and turn it over to public testimony. It's not testimony, it's not rulemaking hearing, public comment. So like I said, if you want to speak, you can raise your hand and we can unmute you, or you can type in a question and we can read it out loud for the recording and the rest of the group. Okay, Cheryl Benjamin, I see that you have your hand raised, so I am going to unmute you and you are free to speak.
Yes, could you clarify, because you're going through a lot of the Practice Act, and I thought we were looking at the e-prescribing only today. So can you, I may have missed the first couple sentences today as I got on, but are we looking at some other things too, or is most of what you're showing redline the changes from Title 12, just clarifying where you find those sections?
So the purpose of the meeting today is twofold. One is to receive input on the implementation of Senate Bill 19079, which is the e-scribing legislation that's effective July 2021. And then the other purpose of the meeting is to receive input regarding the proposed changes that the board discussed at its last meeting for the mandatory rule review that's required by Section 24.4.103.3.
And so the mandatory rule that they discussed last meeting, they didn't have it redlined, but that's what you have now redlined. Is that correct?
Correct. We went through with the board and asked the board, based on the statutory criteria, to weigh in on each of the rules and whether the board wants to take any proposed changes to stakeholders to get input. So the changes that you see in the rules are for all of the board rules. So you can see it's the entire rule set that's on the screen that was also noticed for today's meeting. And the board made the red line changes as part of the rule review to be in compliance with 24.4.103.3. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So we want to make sure that we give people who are on via webinar some time to think, to look at the rules. If you have any questions, that's fine too. So we'll give you a couple more minutes to either raise your hand if you want to speak or type in questions and we can read those out loud. We don't want to cut anyone off. So it might be quiet for a couple minutes, but we're just giving people an opportunity to speak if they want to. All right, Cheryl, I see that you have your hand raised again. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, and you are unmuted.
Yes, I am looking at the electronic prescribing, and I'm Cheryl Benjamin with the Colorado Optometric Association, and I would like to inquire and request that if indeed you, the rule will indicate that the application for e-prescribing, I'm going to be talking about that portion of it, would require documentation, tax returns and other documentation, that there be a way to guide the state board and the optometrist as to what those criteria would be. Otherwise, it becomes very arbitrary to know what is undue, hardship or not. And so I don't know if the board will be undertaking that or Dora, but it would be appropriate, in my opinion, to have a little bit more clarity on how that can be framed. Thank you.
And that makes sense. If you have, on behalf of the association or its members, if you have any suggested language that you don't have to provide it today, but if that's something that you could come up with, that would be helpful for the board to consider, since an economic hardship is something that the board has to define and then also has to determine what would meet that definition for purposes of if someone's claiming an economic hardship to the e-scribing. So just something to think about for future.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll wait until about 1:13. I show it's 1:11 on my clock before we go ahead and wrap up and go over the next steps for this process. All right. So not seeing any other hands raised or any other questions or comments submitted, we will go ahead and proceed. Thank you for participating in today's meeting via webinar. The stakeholder comments that we received, both the written comments and then the comments that were heard today, will be presented to the board before they consider permanently adopting the rules at the permanent rulemaking hearing on May 21st, 2020. At the formal hearing, stakeholders will have another opportunity to testify and provide additional input as needed. If you want to provide written comments, please send them to the general mailbox at dora_dpo_rulemaking@state.co.us. We will accept written comments up to the date of the hearing. However, to provide the board adequate time for review and consideration, we ask that you submit your comments no later than Friday, May 8th, 2020. That concludes our stakeholder meeting. Thank you again for participating, and we are going to go ahead and end the webinar now. Oh, Cheryl, I see you have your hand raised. Before I end the webinar, let me just unmute you again. Sorry, go ahead, Cheryl.
Actually, you answered my question, so I unraised my hand, but I was going to ask about any further comments, but you have clarified that, so thank you.
Okay, sounds good. All right, thank you, everyone. We will end the webinar now.